Hello and welcome to Chapter 3 in Foundations of Business video lectures. Okay, put that there. Okay, so Chapter 3 is the global marketplace. Learning objectives for Chapter 3 include explain why nations trade and describe how international trade is measured. Discuss the nature of conflicts in global business, including free trade, government intervention, and international trade. Identify the major organizations that facilitate international trade and the major trading blocs around the world. Discuss the importance of understanding cultural and legal differences in the global business environment. Define the major forms of international business activity. Discuss the strategic choices that must be considered before entering international markets, and describe the current state of AI, artificial intelligence, assisted translation, and its value in international business. One thing you have to be very careful about in international trade is the name of your product. For example, Nova in Spanish means no go. So the Chevrolet Nova didn't sell very well in Spanish-speaking countries. The new uh, Kona, I believe it's a Kia or Hyundai Kona. Uh, if you are trying to sell that in Portuguese-speaking countries, that might be an issue. So if you're wondering what that means, just Google the Portuguese translation of the word Kona, and you may understand what I'm referencing. So that's one thing to be careful of when you're trading. It's part of the cultural knowledge that you need to have with the country that you're trying to sell your products in. Economic globalization is the increasing integration and interdependence of national economies around the world. Economies of scale, saving from buying parts and materials, manufacturing and marketing in large quantities. This is why Apple doesn't produce anything. Almost all of Apple's products are produced in Asia, most in China, because it's saving them a great deal of money by doing that instead of manufacturing them in the United States. Why the nations trade? Focus on relative strengths. A simple example of this is if you want to create a market for food products that aren't grown in the United States. Coffee would be a good example. You have to trade something for coffee so that you get coffee and they get the country that is trading coffee will get something that they don't have in abundance there or at all there. It expands your markets. You have more customers. Pursuing economies of scale, obviously, the more customers you have, the more you produce, the cheaper it is to produce each unit because you can buy in mass quantities. Acquiring materials, goods, and services, keeping up with the customers, keeping up with competitors. Okay. An example of that would be electric cars. Ford, this isn't for trade per se, but keeping up with competitors. Ford did not dedicate hardly any money whatsoever into electric vehicles, and now that it's pretty certain that electric vehicles will be the dominant vehicle by the end of this decade, they bought, I think, 45% of Rivian, which is a company that Google, I believe, yes, Google helped finance to get them off the ground. And now the Ford F-150 that's going to be electric is going to be made by Rivian, or at least the undercarriage of it. The frame, the shell of it, as far as the inside and what it looks like and all that, that'll be made by Ford. But as far as the batteries and the electrical engineering, the motors, all that type of thing, that'll be made by Rivian. And that's how they're trying to keep up with the competition. Just announced today that Lycos is coming out with a new vehicle. It's the first time they've ever come out with a vehicle, and it's going to have a 0.21 um, air flow. So it's supposed to be the most streamlined car ever made, which of course, the more streamlined it is, the less power it needs to move through the air. So the less power it is, then the less energy from the battery, so the batteries last longer as far as how long they last between charges. Okay, so international trade is measured in balance of trade, trade deficits, and balance of payments. And here is the world's most competitive economies: Japan, Singapore, Hong Kong, Switzerland, Germany, Finland, Sweden, United Kingdom, Netherlands, and the United States. And if we want to look at competitive or balance of trade, let me pull this up here, and we can go into Google, and then we can go into the U.S. debt clock, and then look at the debt clock. This, by the way, is how much we've spent officially and how much we spent unofficially. That's how much the actual spending is. And this is our national debt. And this is our deficit for the year. The deficit is 1 year, the current fiscal year that we're in. The debt is how much we've accumulated through all the fiscal years. So right now we're 26 trillion and 2/3, 26 and 2/3 trillion worth of debt. And for the year, officially, we're 2.8 trillion, and actually, we're almost 4 trillion in debt. Okay, but we wanted to look at balance of trade, and that's on here somewhere. Let's see here. See, this is the median income in the United States per person. Median is middle, so half the country makes less than that, and half the country makes more than that. Here's what it was in 2000. So we've only increased $4,000 in 20 years, the median income. But look at the median price of the new home. The new home today is $322,000. Again, that's median, so half the houses cost less than that, and the other half costs more than that. And then the median house in 2000 was only $165,900. So the price of houses has nearly doubled, where the income has only gone up by about 12%. So you have a 100% increase in housing costs with only a 12% increase in wages. Mm-hmm. You can see how many people are living in poverty, how many don't have insurance, bankruptcies, manufacturing jobs now versus 2000. We've lost 5,000, or excuse me, 5 million manufacturing jobs. I was looking for balance of trade. It's here somewhere. Here it is, trade deficit. So our trade deficit is $821 billion this year. So that means we bought $821 billion more goods than we sold to other countries. The trade deficit just with China, which is part of this 800, is $305 billion. So what is that? 3/8 of our trade deficit is with one country, China. Our oil imports is 95, almost $96 billion. How much oil we've imported. So that's one way of measuring trade debt, trade deficit. Okay, moving on. So strong and weak currencies, who gains, who loses. U.S. buyers pay less for imports. If you have a strong dollar, that means the U.S. dollar can buy more imports. But it also means our exports are much more expensive. So if we go here, here's an example. Let's use Canada for example. Let's go down here to currencies. And let's go to all currencies. And here we go. So if we pull up US Canadian currencies, and if we go here to 5 years, you can see that the dollar to the US dollar to the Canadian dollar back here in 17 it was $1.21. So the US dollar bought $1.21 of Canadian dollars. Okay. Then we come up here, the US dollar buys $1.43 Canadian dollars. So that's what, 20-cent change, which is about 18%, which means that the products coming from Canada to the United States would cost 18% less, and the products going from the United States to Canada would cost 18% more between 2017 and 2020. Now, today, is $1.34, $1.33. So right now, we're trading right around $1.34. So that's one US dollar buys $1.34 Canadian. So we've come down from that high, but it's still much more than, it's almost 8% more, thereabouts, from what it was back here. That was $1.21. You're still looking at 13 cents, 13 Canadian cents more that the US dollar buys, which means our products are still that much more expensive in Canada, and Canadian products are that much more cheaper in the United States. Okay? So that's one way of measuring it and seeing if your exports are going to be cheaper or more expensive than the competition within that home country. Okay? Hey. Free trade. Free trade means that there's no encumbered restrictions between countries. Okay, so NAFTA, what used to be NAFTA, tried to create that. There's a lot of the other ones all around the country that are like that. Okay, all around the world, excuse me, that have free trade agreements so that the exports and imports don't have any restrictions on them, and you can do free trade. Protectionism is when the government policy is aimed at shielding a country's industry for foreign competition. Tariffs levied on imports is one protectionist device. Uh, President Trump just announced the other day that he was going to put tariffs on Canadian aluminum so that it would cost more for the United States companies to buy aluminum from Canada. Um, that cost increase would then be passed on to the manufacturers that use the aluminum, and then of course they would increase prices on the end product. So in the end, all tariffs are paid by consumers. Okay, so because a can of soda is going to cost more if the aluminum costs more, because they have to raise the prices to keep profits where they are, or close to where they are, or grow profits. Import quotas limit how many products are allowed in the country. This is why Mercedes costs so much, because back in the 60s, 50s and 60s, they put quotas on how many Mercedes were allowed to be imported from Germany to the United States. And so Mercedes said, well, if we can only send a certain number of cars to the United States, we're only going to send our most expensive ones there so that we can make the most profit, have the highest revenue and the most profit. And so we only see Mercedes that are very, very expensive. In Germany, they have Mercedes that are expensive, moderate, and less expensive. I wouldn't say cheap, but less expensive. And so all the people there think of Mercedes like we think of General Motors. And I hope you have a great day. I'll see you soon.